those of you who have your bulletin, you see we're going to talk about the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Shach. Okay? And trust me, I could do a three-part series on this just to get through all the details. But what we're going to do is we're going to touch on the most interesting parts. If you are in Revelation 15 verse 13, say Amen.
15, 13. Oh, it says Genesis.
Genesis, I'm sorry. Genesis.
Okay.
15 verse 13. If you're there, say Amen.
Amen.
And he said to Avram, know for certain that your seed are to be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and they shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. But the nation whom they serve I am going to judge, and afterward let them come out with great possessions. You may be seated. You may be seated. You may be seated. This is the actual beginning of the Passover. Okay? This is the beginning of the Passover. Okay? Now, we find it kind of interesting that the Father's speaking to Abraham, and yet he gives Abraham the conditions through which the Passover would be established. The seed of Abraham would go into bondage for 400 years. And later on you will read that it was actually 430. But the thing that's kind of interesting is that the nation which put them into bondage, Yeshua would judge as Elohim in Yahweh. So there will be judgment upon this nation. And I want you to understand something. There were many things that led to this entire scenario. For example, how did the Jews get to Mitzrayim or Egypt? Well, we understand the whole thing with the famine and the famine in the land and Joseph being taken into slavery and all that stuff, and then he finally became the second man in power, and eventually they all wound up in Egypt. Okay? And then when the rule changed, we realized that the Egyptians saw that the Hebrews were great. And because they feared that they might rise up against them, especially if an enemy came, they went ahead and put them into bondage, and that's how the whole thing led to. But I want you to understand, there was a whole series of events that transpired prior to this taking place. Okay? Like I said, the whole life of Joseph, and then him getting into the whole pit thing and everything else. But the most important thing is that the Father gave it to Abraham or Avram. Okay? And this is where the whole thing got started. Now, we find it interesting because we go all the way from Genesis, where he's dealing with Abraham. Now, Abraham is long since dead, before they even go into bondage. Okay? And future generations have already come and gone, and many are going to come and go during this scenario. But then we have to take the whole thing up back in Exodus chapter 3. Okay? There's going to be a lot of scripture that I'm going to give you that we're not going to read over, but I want you to know where it was, where it came from, and I'm going to touch upon it. Okay? And I want to do some of the significance of some of these things. But the important thing here is that this was all set up so we could have the Passover feast. The Father had already established the Passover feast in all eternity, and now he was bringing it to pass here. Okay? So let's go to Exodus 3. We're going to read verses 1 through 10. When you get to Exodus 3 or Shimoth. 3, let me know by saying Amen.
Amen.
Okay. And Moshe was shepherding the flock of Yithro, his father-in-law, the Kohen, in Mivan, and he led the flock to the back of the wilderness, and he came to Horeb, the mountain of Elohim. And the messenger of Yahweh appeared unto him in a flame of fire in the midst of a bush. And he looked and saw the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. And Moshe said, let me turn aside now to see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. And Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, and Elohim called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe. And he said, here I am. And he said, do not come near here. Take your sandals off your feet. For the place which you are standing is Kodesh ground. And he said, I am the Elohim of your father, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yishach, the Elohim of Yaakov. And Moshe hid his face, for he was afraid to look at Elohim. And he said here, I have indeed seen the oppression of my people who are in Mitzrayim. I have heard their cry because of their slave drivers, for I know their sorrow. And I have come down to deliver them from the hand of the Mitzrayites, and to bring them from the land to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place where the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. And now see, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have soon seen the oppression which the Mizrahites oppress them. And now come, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Mitzrayim. In this entire verse of scripture, there's a lot of information here that's given. First of all, how many of you know that all those the Canaanites, those are all direct descendants of Ham, okay, which are deadly enemies against the nation of Israel. They have been from the beginning and will be to the end. And he's going to take them out of one land where all these people hate him also. Okay? So I want you to understand that the Jews have been hated for many years. All this talk, they're talking about slavery and reparations in our country, and yet we've had slavery since the very beginning. Okay? So I don't understand any of that. Needless to say, what I want us to really focus on is that the Yahuwah himself had heard the cry of his people. Now you need to understand that it was their own sinful nature that led them into the bondage in the first place. Okay? And of course the fear of the new people who led Mizraim, or the Mizrahites, okay? Because they felt that they were so great in number they could easily overtake them, so they enslaved them. Okay? And because of this enslavement and everything else, many things were going to happen prior to the Passover, and I want to go over each judgment separately and tell you where it is, because it was the Father himself who said, this nation who shall be the ones who hold them enslaved, I am personally going to judge. See, the judgment of the Father is righteous and true, and no man can say otherwise. So when he establishes himself as the one who is bringing forth your judgment, ain't nobody can do nothing for you. And notice I'm using English words, it ain't nobody. There isn't anyone available to you. Okay? Because his judgments are righteous, they're true, And they're established in Yeshua's blood. I want you to understand something. Do you notice how in the original covenant, all the sin was dealt with blood of animals and goats and whatever, and sheep and whatever. Okay, but all that did was cover the sin. When we got to the final sacrifice of the Lamb of God, that did away with it. That did away with sin. Okay, once and for all. But I want us to really understand that. Listen, I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. Sin will cost you more than you are willing to pay, and it'll take you further than you're willing to go. Sin will cost you more than you are willing to pay, and it'll take you further than you are willing to go. And eventually, it will destroy you eternally. So, if you have any sin in your life you need to deal with, you better deal with it soon. Why am I so adamant about this? Did you hear recently that Benjamin Netanyahu was re-elected to Israel? Our beloved president has already mentioned the peace treaty, which is going to be done during this administration. If one of the descendants who signs that peace agreement is a direct descendant of Aaron, the tribulation period will begin. I didn't say that. He said that. See, but most people in the church aren't getting told this stuff here. Hence the reason why when the trumpet sounds, many of us are going to get left behind. And when I say many of us, I don't plan anybody in this place. Because you've been warned. If you get left behind, you deserve to get left behind because you knew better. Come on now, I'm coming down hard on you right now because I love you. I don't want to look down and say, what are you doing down there? Even worse if you look down and say, what are you doing down there? Come on now. You think that's funny? You'd be surprised how many congregations are going to be standing with their pastors down here looking up. I'm not kidding you.
Come on, man.
Now, notice that he has specifically mentioned all the nations of Ham who were anti-Israel or Israel, to be the land that he was going to give them. Now, do you know that all the fights that we've ever had with these tribes has always been over land? Even right now.
Right.
The fights are over land. The Golan Heights, or whatever that thing is. It's all over land. Okay, and here's the kicker. Folks, the 8,000 square miles that Yahuwah declared for himself and gave to the nation of Israel to dwell in belongs to him and no one else. And the only people who were allowed to be there was the nation of Israel. So anybody else from Palestine, Yugostein, Hippostein, any Stein, none of them belong there. Okay?
Or the eight.
Have we got the picture?
Yes.
Okay? Nobody else belongs there. Not even Puerto Ricanites. I'm sneaking in the back door. But do you understand what I'm saying? All you have to do is look at how it is written. This was already established. It is done. It's not going to change. However, there is one person who has the authority to divide the land and do all kinds of things with it, and that's the high priest of Israel, who started with Aaron. One of those descendants has the right to do that, and only one of those descendants. So once we see the land being divided, things going on, we are right around the corner from let the trumpet sound, oh yeah, let the trumpet sound. And we're going home. See, but we got to be ready for this. This is coming. This is here. This is now. Okay? But most of us are paying no attention to this. And when I say most of us, remember, I'm talking about the entire body that's outside of here And I don't know how much they're getting, but a lot of them aren't getting anything. You don't have to believe me. Turn on the channel. Look at all the television preachers that are out there. You need to put $1,000 each. Really? 49 of you. Or 89 of you. 115 of you. Okay. Click. Time to watch soccer. You understand what I'm saying? We have to be very careful. There's a lot of stuff going out here today that really isn't biblical. Okay? Whenever you listen to a program and they tell you how much to give, turn the channel. Nowhere is it written that Yahuwah will tell you what to give. Unless it's the 10% of the time. But an offering, he has never put a price on it. Because that's between you and him. So when people tell you how much you need to give, turn the channel. It's not in there. It's not in there. Now, yeah, but somebody got blessed after they gave $1,000. Really? You better be careful, see where that blessing came from. All these things and all these kingdoms and everything will I give thee if thou wilt bow down and worship me. The devil said that to Yeshua. Hasatan himself said that to Yeshua. Meaning what? He can make it look like a good blessing. You still going to hell with that $1,000 each. Better be careful. I'm telling you, listen, folks. If I don't tell you these things, I don't know who will. But what I want us really to see is that now Moshe has been commissioned. Come on now, let's go get him. Now, how many of us are like Moses? You're going to go get my people. I can't go over there. I'm a stutterer. I got a sore toe. My sandals don't work. I got to feed the goats and the sheep. And you know how Yitro treated me. He had every excuse in the book not to go. Okay? Now, it is believed that he may have had a stuttering impediment. I've never found it, but he may have had a stuttering impediment. But anyway, to make a long story short, he did go with Aaron. Okay? Now, what I want us to go over now is everything that occurred prior to the Passover. Right? Now, I'm going to give you the scriptures where they're found, and we're just briefly going to go over it, because if we start reading this, we won't get out of here till next Tuesday. There's a lot of scripture. And remember, I already took out 2/3 of this stuff. Otherwise, we'd have had to do a 3-part series just to get to Passover. Now, in Exodus chapter 7, verses 14 through 25, you don't have to turn there, I'm just going to tell you what it is. Okay? Exodus chapter 7, verses 14 through 25. This is where the water is turned to blood. Okay? Now, I want you to notice something that's really, really, really important that most people just... That means it flies right over. Okay? Right over your head. The 10 plagues begin and end with blood. Why? Because the entire covenant is established in blood. I want you to understand something. What does water usually represent? Cleansing, the Holy Spirit, and all this other stuff, okay? All the water was turned to blood. Okay? Meaning what? There was a major event about to happen. And it wasn't for... Now, listen, I want you to understand something. Do you know that if every drop of water in Hilo turned to blood, your faucet will still run regular water? Your faucet will still run regular water. Do you know that no matter where the plagues were throughout Egypt, it did not affect a single Israelite? Not one. They had fresh water, their pipes were working, everything was okay. It was like, here's all of the Israelites in their encampment, and all around them everything is happening. They had fresh water. And here's the kicker. It didn't matter. All they needed to have was a little 5-gallon container. It wouldn't empty. The Father had taken care of his people. Now, one plague ever went upon that nation. It was against. How do we know this for a fact? He said, the nation who enslaves them, I'm going to judge. The nation who enslaves them, I'm going to judge. He didn't say, I'm going to judge them alongside my people. That's not what he said. So, the entire nation of Israel was taken care of while everybody else was being judged. Meaning what? You, as his children, will be taken care of even when the judgments are coming. There's a lot of significance here for us today, see, but we don't want to take the time to really look into what's going on here. We need to understand that. Our world is going to hell in a breadbasket. Right now, the biggest thing in America is a homosexual married man running for the presidency of the United States. Let me make it clear. It's abomination. I wish he'd asked me to talk to his creator. I'd have said, where is Hasatan? That's what I would have told him. Where is Hasatan? I'll talk to him right now. He's with you. Oh, tell me about your religion by the way you treat other people. Really? So you must not be a religious man by the way you treat other people. See what I'm saying? They use this book whenever it is convenient for them to drive a political point home that'll get them a vote, even if it means using abomination. Let me tell you something. He said it was abominable then, which means what? Yesterday, it's abominable today, and it'll be forever. It doesn't change.
Amen. Come on.
See, but we don't understand what this blood is all about. But I want you to understand something. The first plague was blood, and the last one ends with blood. That to me was very significant. Very significant.
Yes.
Okay? Now, once they dealt with the whole blood ordeal, now here's something that's kind of interesting. Did you notice that Yahweh himself hardened Pharaoh's heart? I often thought about that. Why in the world would he harden that man's heart? He was going to prove that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Abraham, Yishkach, and Yaakov, was far greater than any Egyptian god here on earth could ever be. Because remember, that was a man incarnate as God, or whatever they call it. Okay? That's what they believed. He was God on earth. God on earth. Okay. And so he was going to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was a little bit better in every way. Okay? Now, Exodus 8, 1 through 15, we get a bunch of frogs. Now, see, it's a good thing that there were no Puerto Ricans there. We just started fried frog legs. Juanito's fried frog legs. I'm telling you. We'd have made a fortune selling frog legs. Folks, our Father does have a sense of humor.
Sure does.
Okay? And I, being who I am, have the right to use me as a punching bag for jokes. You guys don't have that right, but I do. What I'm trying to get at is that he hardened his heart and the second plague came. Okay? They got through that. Then, in 16 through 19, the lice show up. Same chapter, 8, 16 to 19. Now there's lice everywhere. I'm talking about lice covering the entire, they're everywhere. You can't walk without stepping on these things. Okay? And then they finally get through that, now the flies show up. And that's in verses 20 through 32 of chapter 8. All kind of flies everywhere. Okay? Now, after the flies are done, we get to chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. All the cattle will say, now I want you to understand something. Okay? Here is the border that separates the slaves from the Egyptians. But they wouldn't cross the border. But they wouldn't cross the border. Not one fly on the other side. But they were everywhere else. And like, all these flies everywhere. Okay?
Oh, man.
But they wouldn't listen, they wouldn't cross the other side. Okay? Now you talk about a perfect fly barrier. Man, if I can package that, instant millionaire. But anyhow, I want you to understand that the protections of Yahweh for his children are second to none. If you think, look, do you know that when you got saved, you got an insurance policy? He promised to take care of your health. That's an insurance policy. He promised to take care of the things that you own. That's an insurance policy. He promised to bless you with the things that you need. That's an insurance policy. You got like 3 or 4 insurance policies as promises, and most people don't even see it like that. I gotta go to State Farm. For what? Insurance policy. And we have to because of the laws of the land that we don't want to break, and we understand that. That's fine. It's perfectly okay. But I want you to understand, I would rather have her hedge of protection, which I have, on my car, like she's got, in addition to State Farm. See, State Farm will cover me if somebody hits me, but the first one will keep them from hitting me, so I don't really need State Farm, but then I'm going to get in trouble with the state. Do you understand what I'm saying? We follow the laws of the land because that's what we're supposed to do. That's okay. But what I'm saying, I would rather have divine protection over man's protection any day of the week.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Come on.
Because man will fail me.
Yes.
But my Father won't.
Yes.
You know why he doesn't fail me? Because he said to me, I'm loving you. That's what he said. I said, you sure, man? You sure you loving me? I can talk to him like that. He knows exactly what I'm saying. But I want you to understand. Listen, you're supposed to be with your father like a child is with its parent. It's okay for you to go up to him and be silly. It's okay for you to play in front of him and enjoy. It's okay for you to rejoice with him. Rejoice in him. Rejoice because of him.
Yes.
And let him know how wonderful he is.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with it. He longs for that from each and every one of us.
Yes.
Why do you think he says that out of the mouth of babes he has perfected praise? He gets more praise from children than he gets from adults. Oh my Lord, did he just say that? He just slapped me in both cheeks. Yes, I did. He gets more praise out of children than he does out of his adults. Right, because we do it once a week. Why don't you do it every day? That's all I'm going to say. Now, chapter 9, verses 1 through 7, the cattle disease. Except the Israel cattle are fine. Now, everybody in verse 8 through 12 of chapter 9, they get boils. Boils on their skin. Okay? And that's finally dealt with. Now, if that's not enough, verses 13 to 35, now there's hail coming down everywhere. And it burns up a lot of stuff too. And every time that this is going on, he's hardening Pharaoh's heart. Okay? He's hardening Pharaoh's heart. Right? Now, finally, in chapter 10, verses 1 through 20, the locusts show up. I'm just telling you where the things are. We're not going to read all this because there's too much scripture. But in Exodus 10, 1 through 20, the locusts show up. And let me tell you, right now, suspended. I can't remember exactly where it is. There is a massive, and I mean massive, ball of locusts about to get cut loose. And wherever they go, they're about to destroy all the food in the land. So is there a possibility that we may be facing a little famine?
Very possibly.
It can't possibly be for us, not the nation that aborts more children than China. Did he just say that? Yes, he did. There's blood on our hands, church. Every time we take one of those big little babies out of the womb, there's blood on our hands. Okay? Not to mention everything else we're doing. Okay, with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Okay, now. So the locusts are everywhere. Then the locusts are dealt with. And now verses 21 through 29 is the darkness over the whole place. You think by now this guy would kind of get the idea that, I'm dealing with something here that's far greater than I am. Because it gets turned on and turned off at will. At will. Gets turned on, I ask for Moses to turn it off, and Moses turns it off. Something's going on here. But that didn't happen. Okay? And now we're going to go to Exodus 12. And now we're going to read actually 42 verses. But we're going to read the first 14. Okay? Exodus 12.
Amen.
Are we all there?
Amen.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe and to Aharon in the land of Mitzrayim, saying, this month is the beginning of months, which will be Nisan. It is the first month of the year for you. So now they're going to get their first calendar. Speak to all the congregation of Israel on the 10th day of this month. Each one of them is to take to himself a lamb, according to the house of his fathers, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next door share the house and take it according to the number of the beings to each man's need. Make your count for the lamb. Now let's just say, for example, that Sis was about to get a lamb, and there's only 3 of them in her house, okay? And we have Cisco next door, he's got 7. So now Sis said, Cisco, can we do this together? So instead of having 3 and 7, there was 10 for that one lamb. So we could have gotten together, as long as we were together, okay, we could do that, okay? Or like we decided to have the women's ministry do a lamb and the men's ministry do a lamb, and we could have done that too. Okay? But what I'm saying is that he's allowing opportunity for those small family members who probably wouldn't consume the whole lamb to put 3 or 4 families together and make a big number so the lamb could be consumed.
Amen.
Okay? Notice that the focus is on the consumption of the lamb. Come on now. Did that wake you up a little? Okay? Knowing that later we're going to have a nice looking lamb come and say, oh. Name is Yeshua. Okay? And if okay. Verse 5, correct?
Yes.
Let the lamb be a perfect one. That would exclude 90% of most of the lambs. A year-old male, take it from the sheep or from the goats. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. And then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it between the evening. Now I want you to understand something. This is very significant here. He went and got it on the 10th day. An animal of a first year is still relatively a yearling. Meaning what? It requires care. You have to feed it, you have to bathe it, you have to water it, okay? It requires care. And then 4 days later, you kill it. The reason for that is so that somehow in your heart, you would get a feeling of what it cost the father when he had to sacrifice his lamb. Oh, I know you didn't want to hear that. It's to give us a symbolic gesture. See, you were going to get rid of it. That was so cute. And then the kids would get so attached to it. And then you had to kill it. Okay? But it would give them a sense of they lost something. Just like the father lost something. You understand what I'm saying? The lamb here represents the lamb here, and when they were both slaughtered, they each lost something. Okay? Very significant little passage of scripture, which most people just go, whoop. Okay, then it says, and they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel and of the house where they eat it. And they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire, with unleavened bread, with bitter herbs. They shall eat it. Now, I want to stop here and go over a little bit. I'm going to teach as we go. Okay. The lamb, of course, represents Yeshua. The blood, of course, is blood. How many of you have ever actually bought unleavened bread? You have? You have?
Her.
You have? Okay. So you guys have seen unleavened bread, right? What are the three common things of unleavened bread? First of all, they're all the same size, the good squares, right? And they're all burnt. Burnt. Right? And they're full of holes. And they got all kinds of lines in them with the holes on it. Do you know that without those holes you can't bake it? It won't bake without the holes because the heat has to be able to go through it. But now let me tell you something. The burn part of that represents the bruises he received prior to being crucified. The holes represent his impalement. And the stripes, the beating. It's very symbolic. Very symbolic. Okay, so when you take a piece of matzah and you look at it from now on, you get to see, you're going to look at it differently. Because everything on it means something to the original, to the final lamb. It represents something for him. Okay? Holes to holes, crown to bruising, right? And the stripes on his back. All right, let us continue. Anybody else having fun beside me? I thought you were going to have a fun day today. It's a great teaching day for me. You know when I get there? Never mind.
Not looking for lamb.
Okay. What verse am I on? Okay. And they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted with fire and with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Now listen to me very carefully. The bitter herbs is nothing more than a representation of 430 years of slavery. The bitter herbs represent the bitterness they went through during that time period. And when you eat the bitter herbs, it's supposed to give you a reminder of what they must have gone through. Okay? There's no way you can tell what they went through because some of them were slaughtered, some of them were killed, others were used for other things, you know, so it really doesn't matter. But it gives you an idea as to what they went through. Okay? So that covers the things of the meal. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roast it in fire. Okay? It is with its head, with its legs, and with its inward parts. I mean, the whole thing was getting roasted. Now, I want you to understand something. Do you notice that the lamb is being roasted with fire? That's the judgment. That fire represents the judgment that's coming. Okay? Because remember, it's the Lamb that keeps you from judgment. So he takes the fire on himself for you. It's hellfire, it's judgment. But when the Lamb is there, and the Lamb is here, he takes your fire for you so you can put on a cloak of salvation and enter into eternity. Okay? Let us continue. Right? Verse 10. And do not leave it until the morning, and what remains of it until the morning you are to burn with fire. And this is how you are to eat it. Your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hands, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Pesach of Yahweh. Notice that this holiday is a holiday of Yahweh himself. This is not a holiday of the Jews. Most people have you think today that this is a Jewish holiday. No, it isn't. It is a holiday specifically of Yahweh. And it is for him, it is to honor him in what he did for his people. I heard the most ridiculous thing the other day from a Jehovah's Witness. They had the audacity to try to tell me that the Jewish people are no longer the chosen people. It took everything I had within me to come in here, get this stick, and beat the daylights out of her. I said, easy, stick, easy. He is the same.
Right.
Ayer, today, mañana. Yesterday, today, and forever. It doesn't change. So anyway, at that point, I know to take my time, wind it up, put a couple locks. Adios! I have never heard such ridiculousness in my life. And they actually believe this garbage. So anyway, let's get back to I just had fun there. All right, now I want you to notice that all the parts that were originally sacrificed now were part of the inwards and everything else, and it was all there, okay? Now, I want you to notice that they were ready to flee. They were fully dressed. Okay? Verse 11. This is how you're going to eat it. Your loins girded, means your clothes are on. Your sandals on your feet. Usually you just take the sandals off, wash their feet, and come in. Right? Your staff in your hand. Where would you... You were only eating with one hand. Your staff was in your hand. Okay? I want you to understand something. The staff in their hand represented their deliverance. Because Moses was sent to them as a deliverer, and he brought the staff. It was symbolic of their deliverance. Anybody else having fun beside me?
Wow.
Now listen to this, okay? All right, so now let's go to verse number 12. So remember, this is a celebration of Yahweh himself. Okay? And this is the most important verse of the entire thing. And I, meaning Yahweh himself. How do we know it's Yahweh himself? That word I right there. Because he was the one talking to Abraham. Way back in Genesis, he was the one who spoke to Abraham. And he said, I will judge this nation. And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim on that night, and shall smite all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, which is also Egypt, both of man and beast. And all of the mighty ones of Mitzrayim shall execute, and all the mighty ones of Mitzrayim I shall execute judgment. I am Yahweh. Whew, how sweet that is.
Yes.
Let me read this one more time. It kind of got me excited. And I shall pass through the land of Mitzrayim on that night, and shall smite the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, both man and beast, and on all the mighty ones of Mitzrayim I shall execute judgment. I am Yahweh. Wow, what a declaration. Yeah, I am who I am, and I'm bad. Can you dig it? Terminology you understand, huh, today? That's what he was saying back then, except we have to spice it up a little bit, because now, we hip now, we cool. Walk this way. Looks like you got spasms in your back. So anyway, this is a very powerful statement. Now, remember that they killed that little lamb, right? And the blood shall be a sign for you on the on the house where you are. And when I see the blood, I shall pass over you. There is the Passover. Take a look at it. And the blood shall be a sign for you and on the house where you are. And when I see the blood, I shall pass over you. This is the Passover. Woo! And let the plague not come on you to destroy you when I smite the land of Mitzrayim. And this day shall become to you a remembrance. And you shall observe it as a festival to Yahweh. It's not a Jewish festival. Throughout your generations, observe it as a festival and everlasting law. This is phenomenal, folks. This is what the Passover is all about. That's literally what it's all about. We still got to finish the whole thing and read the rest of it, 29 through 42, but in the same chapter. But I want us to see exactly how the whole thing went about. Okay? And listen, even at the very end, you know what the last judgment of Pharaoh was? Anybody remember?
Did you drown?
Swimming underwater.
Yeah.
Underwater swimming.
With several dozen pounds of bronze armor.
His last judgment was burying them all in the Red Sea. Underwater swimming. By the way, for those of you who are theologically inclined, or if anybody wants to challenge that this actually happened, we have actually found chariot wheels in the same place where they crossed, and they carbon dated to the exact time of Pharaoh. They carbon dated to the exact time of Pharaoh. So if anybody wants to question this, go ahead and question it. Go down to the Museum of Science. It's there, and you can take them there. Just in case anybody wants to question the validity of my father's word, and that's just one of many that I can show you. That's what happens when you're scientifically bio-brutal with it. Been there, done that, don't like it. Okay, now verse 29. Okay? And it came to be that at midnight that Yahweh smote all the firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat in his throne, to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, and he and all his servants, all that, verse 30. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants, and all the Mitzrites. And there was a great cry in Mitzrayim, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. And yet there were none dead on the other side, where the nation of Israel was. Okay? Verse 31. Then he called for Moshe and Aaron by night and said, Arise, go out from the midst of my people, for you and the children of Israel, and go and serve Yahweh as you have said. Take both your flocks and your herds, and as you have said, and go. Then you shall barak me too. He finally gave in.
there's hope for Pharaoh, right there. He asked Moses to bless him. Meaning, he may have repented. I don't know, it's a nice statement. Then you shall barak me too. And the Mitzrayites urged the people to hasten and to send them away out of the land, for they said, we are all dying. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls bound up in their garments and their shoulders. And the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moshe, and they had asked from the Mitzrayite objects of silver and objects of gold and garments. And Yahuwah gave the people favor in the eyes of the Mitzrayites, so that they gave them what they asked, and they plundered the Mitzrayites. Then the children of Israel departed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides the little ones. You want to hear something that's kind of interesting? There wasn't a single solitary person in this bunch, irregardless of age, who was not able to walk with everybody else at the same pace. You talk about divine, man. I mean, here you are, okay, young, 22-year-old, and your grandfather's passing by you. He's 104.
Please.
Yo, Grandpa! There we are. But you understand what I'm saying? Not a feeble one among them. You look at the significance of this. You know what I mean? Wonderful. Okay? Besides the little ones, which they were carrying. And a mixed multitude went up with them, also flocks and herds, very much livestock. This verse touched my heart. You know why?
Amen.
It's a mixed multitude, they Gentiles in there. I'm in it. He knew many years later I would come, but he included me here. Oh, God, that touched my heart. And a mixed multitude went up with them, also flocks and herds, very much livestock. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they had brought out of Mitzrayim, for it was not leavened, since they were driven out of Mitzrayim and had not been able to delay it, nor had they prepared food for themselves. Now you realize how the father had already made them make all these preparations beforehand, and all that they was put in a sack and take it with them.
How many of you have ever taken dough, flour, and put water on it? It becomes a sticky, gooey mess, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can you keep the flies off of it? Can you keep the bugs off of it? No. How long does it last? Not very long. You see the Father's hand in taking care of the food, especially the unleavened bread. And here's the kicker. He also multiplied. So if all you have is a little 5-pound bag, and you cut it in half, and you put that half away, and then you come back and you try to figure out, did I just use 2.5 pounds of this? To make sure that everybody had the unleavened bread. I mean, he saw me, but like I said, that 38th verse touched me because I was included in it as a Gentile. Okay? Verse 40, we're going to go to the last two verses. And the sojourns of the children of Israel who lived in Mitzrayim was 430 years. Remember I told you that the whole thing was 430 years? But he was only going to be with them for the 400. I think it has to do with the fact that maybe, just maybe, there was an additional 30 years, or maybe between the household of Joseph, whatever. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that they were set free. And it came to be at the end of the 430 years, on that same day, it came to be
that all the divisions of Yahuwah went out from the land of Israel.
This is what you're supposed to remember. The first hour is the deliverance, the actual deliverance. When you are sitting down partaking of the Passover feast, the first hour is dedicated to, the entire hour, to this area here, how they got out of the land of Egypt. The second hour is dedicated to the meal itself. Okay? The third hour also partakes of some eating and stuff like that, but it's more of like a dessert time, where you fellowship and things like this. But so the first one is to establish what it is. So you have first deliverance, then you have the second hour, which is our second deliverance, and then you have the third hour, which is our final deliverance into eternity. So it's a three-stage deliverance. Okay? And basically, this is what it's all about. But, like I said, there's a lot more to this. Now, this year for us, Saturday, April 20th, 2019 is the Passover. That's the date in the American calendar. April 20th would be the day of the Passover. And then, of course, it would start 7 days before. So 20 minus 7, 13. So from the 13th to the 20th is where the Passover would be. Okay? So I want you guys to just be aware, and of course we would have to have the lamb before that, 3 days before that. So I just want to let you know what the things are for this year. Listen, this is a very, very important, what I would call holy day, simply because he's holy, and it's his day.
Dash.
It's his entire thing. Okay, and of course. Holy being a pagan word, it is Kodesh. Kodesh. Okay? So we need to make sure that beyond a shadow of a doubt we understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why why it's all happening. This literally, if you really think about it, that 38th verse is really revealing. Because the Gentiles are in there. If we go through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it talks of, I have to go get a flock of sheep that are not of this herd. He's talking about the Gentiles. Okay? When he was finally crucified, okay, or staken, placed on a stake, we were included in that whole scenario. So I find it very interesting that from the beginning, we are included in the whole thing. Originally, we're strangers, okay, mixed multitude, and so forth and so on, until we get to the point where we're finally called Gentiles, and the Gentiles are now included. Now, listen to me very carefully. If Yeshua is the vine, anybody thinks otherwise, then I'll rephrase the statement. Yeshua is the vine. I have to throw the word if in there because some of you may not be, 100% with that. If you're not, let me know. Right in the back of the head. So Yeshua is the vine.
Amen.
The Father is the husbandman. What does that make the vine? A Jewish vine. A Jewish vine that's bearing Puerto Rican fruit. Why? Because I was grafted into it. When I received him as my Lord, okay, when I received him as my Savior, okay, as my ransom, when he redeemed me, okay, it was at that point that the husbandman, the Father, was able to graft me into the vine. And what did he call me? He called me a branch. I am the vine, you are the branches. Which means we're grafted in. If we're grafted in to the vine, and we take it all the way back to its roots, that's where the Passover is, down at the root. Before we even came along, well, Passover was already down there. So we are supposed to celebrate the thing. You know, it's now that I'm starting to realize how important this is for us as Jews, Gentile Jews. Why? Because every one of us, if we get traced back, we go back to one of the three sons of Noah. And before that, back to Adam. So technically, we're all Jews. Meaning we should be celebrating these holidays like they are. And recognizing them for what they are. Do you understand what I'm saying? The significance and the importance of it. And listen, I know that I don't really know how to do this. But let me tell you something. The Father will honor you doing something wrong, trying to get it right, than a sin in your life. He would at least acknowledge the fact, well, he tried. Wasn't like it's supposed to be, but he tried. I'm pleased with that. He was trying. Okay? And I think we have it all figured out pretty much. The 3 hours and how it's supposed to be. Right? And when we go through it, we're going to go through those same scriptures we just went over in the first hour. And once we read it, we're pretty much done. Then we'll partake of the meal. And then the last one, like I said, it's almost like a dessert time, but a fellowship. Right? So I want you to really understand what this Passover is all about. It's not just something that, Yahuwah decided to go to Domino's and get a pepperoni pizza. He had heartburn, and the heartburn caused him to have a Passover. No! Nothing to do with that. From the beginning. Now, where's the beginning? Down there, at the end. See, our beginning is his ending. Because he had it all figured out before it even got started. It's really hard to believe, but everything that's going on here today and it's going on throughout the entire world, including what the devil is doing. The Father already knows. Okay?
Amen.